Today, we are talking about the Mutant Genesis box for Marvel Champions. Now, I already talked about the heroes with Shadowcat and Colossus, and I'll put the videos, I guess, in that corner it'll be, so you can check out my overall thoughts of them. But I want to talk about each of the villains, kind of my likes and dislikes of each one, so let's jump into it. All right, our very first villain that we encounter is Sabretooth. And from the beginning, this always seemed like an interesting design, right? You have to keep Robert Kelly alive, and it's kind of this rush thing that you have to do, right? With Stalked by Sabretooth, after the resolving step 1 of the villain phase, you deal deal 2 damage to Robert Kelly, and then 3 if there's at least 6 threat here. It's kind of an interesting take on this, where, you have to almost rush right away to try to save Robert Kelly, right? So, how do you do that? Well, it's a side scheme. And Robert Kelly cannot be healed by player card effects, so you can't just kind of keep him alive because you don't know where he is, right? And the first player detaches Robert Kelly from this and takes him, and then you advance to 2A. It's after you thwart all 5. So if you have a high thwarting hero, it's not too bad. But it can be kind of this little rush game you play right in the beginning. And then it gets into this environment that you can see right here, protect the senator. After your hero defends against an attack from Sabretooth, spend 2 resources of any type to ready your hero. And only the player that has Robert Kelly can do this, right? So I kind of like the idea of you're balancing keeping Robert Kelly alive. You have to find him really quick. It's almost like, I don't want to say 2 different games that you play, but it's kind of like a game where you're rushing to find Robert Kelly. Once you get him, you have to kind of keep him alive. And it can be tough because there are cards in here in the Sabretooth deck that, Sabretooth Treachery. Sabretooth Strike, Treachery. Deal 1 damage to Robert Kelly. You may exhaust your hero to prevent this, and you'll find yourself doing things like this. And this helps balance it out, I think, right? Because if it was just deal 1 damage to Robert Kelly and you kept getting it over and over, well, that stinks, right? You have to figure out different ways to heal him. You have to modify your deck a lot, and it would be rough to do. Now, the other thing you have to worry about with Sabretooth is the fact that after he activates against you, scheming or attacking, doesn't matter which, you discard the top card of the encounter deck and you heal damage from Sabretooth equal to the number of boost icons. So this can be pretty rough because Sabretooth can just kind of keep coming, right? He can kind of keep doing damage to you, keep attacking. But that's what kind of makes this whole scenario, I think, a bit unique. There's some other cards in here we're not going to get into, but I think for a first villain, this is probably one of the most unique villains that's out there. For the first one, I would say. Yeah, I think I would say that. I think this is the most unique one. It could be one of the more challenging ones. It could be pretty tough, especially when you get to stage 3 where he has Retaliate. A lot of villains now are coming in with tough, so I'm kind of just used to that at this point. But coming in with Retaliate makes things really hard, makes him really challenging. For me, kind of like a Flow Like Water deck works really well against him, right? It kind of gets around Retaliate. You're defending a lot anyway, and it kind of helps a lot with this, I think. But still, he's a really good challenge. He's a lot of fun, and he's a pretty unique villain, which is something we always look for. So the next one up is Project Wide Awake. This is also the Sentinels one. And it's funny because when you play this, there are a ton of different side schemes that come into play kind of right off the bat, right? So Abduction Protocols is one of those side schemes that comes in right away. And the player who defeated this side scheme takes 1 set-aside captive ally and puts in the player under their control and has a crisis icon on it. We also have the whole Night of the Sentinels thing, right? So after threat is placed here, this is the main scheme that's on. If there's at least 5 per player here, the first player places the top card of their deck under Operation Zero Tolerance, then removes 5. So you can't thwart out, right? But cards go under Operation Zero Tolerance. So what's that, you may ask? Well, after an enemy attacks and defeats an ally, place that ally under here. If there are X face-down cards under this game, which is 3 more than the amount of players, you lose the game. Right, simple as that. You lose the game, and I think this is cool. I always like different ways that they come up with you losing games. I think it's always interesting. I will say that if you can thwart a lot, you'll do pretty well here. And then kind of once you end up getting Jubilee right here, Jubilee helps a lot. This exhaust Jubilee and spend an energy resource, deal 2 damage to enemy, kind of really saved me a lot in this game. And yeah, it is kind of really helpful. What else do we have? We have here we go. There it is. So Mutants at the Mall is the other card that gives, or the card that gives you Jubilee, for those that are wondering. The first player searches the encounter deck and discard pile for a Sentinel minion and reveals it. Flip this card and put Jubilee in play. So that's how you end up getting Jubilee. So the 4 allies or the captive allies that you have is Richter 2113, and after Richter attacks, deal 1 damage to the villain each minion engaged with you, which is pretty strong. Boom Boom, which I seem to be getting all the time. I don't know if this is anyone else or it's just me, but I seem to be getting Boom Boom all the time. But after she attacks, place an enemy, place 1 bomb counter on it. At the end of the player phase, remove all bomb counters from play and deal 2 damage to each enemy for each bomb counter that was removed from this way. Pretty sweet, right? Pretty sweet in the way that works. I've been a big fan of that. Again, a 2-1-1-3 ally. Cannonball, 2-1-2-3. Cannonball takes -1 consequential damage after he attacks and defeats a minion. That's not bad. And Wolfsbane, a 2-1-2-3. Wolfsbane attack gains piercing. Piercing is always nice to have. So yeah, I have to say that I've been a fan of this. The Sentinel minions are really tough, and I really enjoy that. We have some minion decks, what is it, like Hydra Patrol or whatever, that seem to have really weak minions. And I have to say that the minions in here are pretty strong. It's pretty nice. And yeah, I'm a fan of it. It just feels like when you're just thwarting a lot, it's a bit easier to do this, right? As long as you thwart a ton, you'll probably do well in this scenario. But I like that it starts off with like what 3, I think, side schemes, and in the campaign I think it's 4 if I remember correctly. But I like that it starts off with all these different side schemes. There's kind of different paths to do things. I think it's neat. I also think it's kind of weird that Operation Zero Tolerance, starts off with 3 threat, and even if you reduce it to nothing, like does it really matter because it gains permanent, at least in this. Now I get why they kind of did it because you can use it for other things, right? Operation Zero Tolerance, but for this situation, like it's kind of weird. And just for those that are wondering, this is where it got permanent from, was on Night of the Sentinels. So again, I like Project Wide Awake. I think it's pretty good overall. It's fun, it's interesting, and I think it was what I would call kind of a safe villain, right? It does some cool things, right? I do like what it does. I'm not gonna trash or anything, but with the captive ally aspect to it, it kind of makes it a bit easier. This scenario would have been a lot tougher if they never did that. But with the captive allies and especially Jubilee, I feel like the scenario gets, again, I don't want to say easy, but pretty easy. This almost feels like a level 1 scenario difficulty wise, while Sabretooth feels a bit harder. So that balances out. I'm not gonna bash that too much, but yeah, I think Project Wide Awake is better than I thought it would be. I think it's pretty fun and pretty interesting. So yeah, I'm a fan of that. All right, the next one is Master Mold, and this right off the bat was the only one where, again, it is unique. It's interesting in how it works, but it's the only one where I felt like like straightforward. Like it was very straightforward, I guess is the best way to put it. So Master Mold has Stalwart and Tough. When Master Mold schemes against you, discard cards from the encounter deck until a Sentinel minion is discarded. Put that minion into play, engage with you. All right, fair enough. And then the Sentinel Factory on the main scheme, each Sentinel minion gains guard. Each player discards cards from the encounter deck until they discard a Sentinel minion, then puts in play, engage them when it's first brought in. So basically, the whole idea is that every time he schemes, right, you're going to keep dealing with minions. So the best bet is just don't let him scheme, right? Like, don't flip down. So as a solo player, we're kind of in tune with this already, right, of not flipping down. And now there are times where naturally you're going to have to, right? And there are bad cards like Shields Up and that give each Sentinel minion engaged with you a tough status, which really stinks if you let the Sentinel minions like pile up, right? And the side schemes can be a bit rough, right? With the whole virus program, with the acceleration token, obviously when you defeat it, it's good. And then Intruder Alert, when defeated, the player defeated the scheme, discard cards until a Sentinel minion, right? It's going to keep putting Sentinel minions in there, so you just have to kind of balance out taking out Master Mold while also dealing with all these minions. And again, as a solo player, you're kind of used to not flipping down a ton, so they're probably not going to be scheming a ton. So to me, this isn't that bad of a scenario for a solo player. Again, I think it's interesting the way that they're doing this. I think it's fine. It just, I guess, feels weak. It feels weak. And it's funny too because I'll be honest. At first glance, I thought this and Project Wide Awake, Master Mold and Project Wide Awake, were like a little too similar to each other because of the whole Sentinel idea. And when you actually play it in practice, it's much better than I thought it would be. There is a different feel with it just because one does focus mostly on the side scheme aspect and one focuses a lot more on minions, even though they kind of roughly use some of the same cards right now, all the same cards obviously, but some of the same cards. So I think it's a good scenario, but again, it feels like a bit of dip in difficulty, especially compared to like Sabretooth, right? The Master Mold and Project Wide Awake kind of feel about the same to me. But that's okay because they are going to ramp up that difficulty because I struggle against Mansion Attack. I don't know what it is, but I struggle. And the whole mechanic of the 4 different villains kind of taking turns to come out and like fight you and whatnot is cool. Like I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would. So the main scheme is, I think you can see this on the screen, deal each player a face down encounter card, advance to the next card in the main scheme deck, add this card to the victory display, right? So right away, you're getting an encounter card, which is always bad. That's things, right? So this gets you to the whole save the school environment and the atrium and the cafeteria and the basketball court and the courtyard, right? There's so many different main schemes that can come in and how they can affect you. And what's cool is as it is a main scheme like this, let's say, is completed, right? Once you hit the 7th threat, it goes to the victory display. And if there, is 3 or more in there, you lose the game. And you start off with Brotherhood Strikes in the victory display right away. And I think it's a pretty cool, like, neat idea that it's not just you're advancing things, right? And maybe advancing isn't that bad. If it goes in the victory display, it's not so bad, right? Like, you can kind of like play with it a little bit more, I feel like. But what makes them so tough, really, is the constant thing at the top, right? So the atrium has each character gain steady. The cafeteria has each character gains retaliate, which can be good and bad, depending on how you do it. Each ally and minion gains toughness, which again can be good, right? If done correctly. And then the courtyard, each character gains +1 attack. So I like what they're doing with these main schemes. It took me forever, by the way, to like remember them. Like I kept forgetting them, but I like what they're doing here. That they're changing up the rules of the game, and it isn't just a hindrance to you, right? It's something that also can help you, but also helps the enemy as well. So we should probably go through, I guess, the 4 villains because they're all pretty unique and interesting. Avalanche is a 2/3. This is on the A side. There's a B side. Is it B side? Yeah, it's B side. Tough Victory 2. After Avalanche attacks you, exhaust an ally you control, which can be really rough if you're running an ally heavy deck. Blob is a 1/2. Again with tough. After Blob attacks and damages a character, stun that character. Pyro is a 2/0. Also with toughness. After Pyro attacks you, discard the top 2 cards of your deck. Take 1 indirect damage for each resource printed or each resource icon printed on this card. Those are all bad. He's the worst to me. I cannot stand Toad. I get Toad all the time. He's a 2/2 with tough. After Toad attacks and damages a character you control, discard 1 random card from your hand. So like chump blocking is basically taken out because of that. It's really frustrating and really tough to deal with him. And the way that this whole scenario works, right, is when you defeat one, then depending on the difficulty level, you put a new one in, and then when you defeat X amount, I think standard's like 2, and then 3 is hard or something like that, or expert. But even when you defeat one, it's not always great because you get this environment save the school. So after the villain's defeated, if there are X villains in the victory display, the players win the game. That explains what I just said. Otherwise, deal each player an encounter card and reveal the next minion. If a minion of the same title as the new villain is engaged with that player, discard that minion and the villain activates. Again, I kept getting terrible luck with this and having minions activate against me. So I think that they have, maybe they don't have the ally or the minion version. I thought they did. But for each of these villains, there's a minion version of it, which can be out there on the table. And it also really stinks, right? It's really, really tough. This is a pretty tough scenario. I thought at first this was going to replicate a lot more of like the Wrecking Crew, where they alternate taking attacks on you, or even the Sinister Motives one, which is already escaping my mind, where you're in the tunnel and you're trying to thwart your way out, basically. I thought it was going to be more like that. And this idea of just, no, it's just one. They're terrible. And a new one coming in is rough. It's really, really rough. it's really kind of detrimental to you. So I really like this scenario as well. I think this scenario was pretty cool. I think it was pretty interesting. Again, the toughest thing is just kind of balancing everything. This scenario, every time I played it, feels like there's a lot going on and a lot to keep track of, and I always seem to like screw up on it. It's I know I have a hard time with rules in general, but this one just seems rough for me. I don't know why. Hopefully, I get better at it. But I like this scenario. I think the scenario is a lot of fun and pretty unique. All right, so lastly, we have Magneto. And Magneto is rough. He's a good final boss. He's starts off on as a 2/2 with steady and toughness, and he does this whole magnet counter thing after he attacks you. This magnet counter thing will be the end of you, probably. Because, for example, in Asteroid M, which is the 1B scenario, after you place a magnet counter here on the scheme, if there are at least 3 magnet counters here, discard cards from the encounter deck until a magnet card is discarded. Reveal that card, then you remove 3 magnet counters. Now, magnetic cards are things like this bubble, right? When Magneto would take any mad damage, place it here instead. Discard, or then if there's 8 or more damage here, discard his card, and then gives him retaliate. That's terrible. He's just absorbing and retaliating you. This is also really bad. Your identity cannot thwart, attack, defend, or recover. It basically can't do anything. In order to get rid of it, you have to exhaust your identity. Oh, and spend the A fist resource, because why not? Electromagnetic Blast exhausts each upgrade and support you control, which is okay. But then you have to place 1 magnet counter on the scheme to, get it back going. Hold on, let me get one of the other ones. There it is. So there's Electric Shock, which is rough. And this one I seem to be getting a lot. So depending on which side you either are confused or you are stunned, and you place 1 threat in the main scheme if you're alter ego for each magnet counter on it, or you take 1 damage for each magnet counter on the main scheme. This is really rough. This is something that can ruin your game super quick. That's a super rough card. Metal Shards, deal 1 damage to each character you control, place 1 magnet counter on the main scheme. That isn't as bad. And some of the side schemes, like, they're a little rough, but they weren't, I don't know, they weren't over the top, I thought. For me, what I've kind of realized as the strategy is that because of his whole steady thing, you can't stun and confuse him. And every time he attacks, right, he's putting magnet counters on. So what you have to do is kind of rush through the side scheme deck, which starts off on Boarding Party, right? So he can only take up to 6 damage. After you thwart 3 off, it flips up to Sabotage Master Mold, where then he can at least take 12 damage, which is nice. And then that flips up to where he can take 18 damage, which okay. And then it switches to Physical Strain, right? Which is a permanent card for Magneto, and he loses the steady, which seems to be, for me, the way I beat him, right? Because if I can start stunning him over and over and over, that's my only shot, really. I've gotten pretty close to beating him quite a few times, but I haven't quite done it yet. But I will say this for Magneto, I think he's hard, but he's fair. And this is the first time I feel like I'm saying that in a long time with any of these campaign boxes. So I like Magneto. I think he's a fun scenario. And yeah, let me switch to the other camera, and we will talk about all my overall thoughts on this box. All right, so I think this box, when I first did the preview, I was a little worried because there wasn't a ton of things that seemed really new and fresh. And I think with Project Wide Awake, as in the Sentinels and Master Mold, it's a little different, right? I'll give him credit. It's a bit different, but it's not super different, right? It's not something I thought it was going to be like super over the top different. But it's still good, right? I mean, they're still fine scenarios. They just didn't blow me away, and they still don't really blow me away to this day. But I still like them, right? I still think they're fine. I will say that Sabretooth is one of the standout scenarios to me. I think it's very difficult, very fun. A little niche of a scenario, because it's the pattern I feel like is kind of the same in how you would beat him, with just rushing to find the senator, and then kind of them worrying about Sabretooth, right? So that's, I don't know if I'll get bored of that eventually or not. That's my only concern. But I mean, so far I've played him about 5 times, and it was fun. I enjoyed it all the time, so I've enjoyed playing Sabretooth. And I will say that again, as a protection Flow Like Water deck, it works really well against him. Mansion Attack. I really like the scenario. It was more interesting and different than I thought it would be. And this is the big thing. Like, when we do these preview videos, I enjoy doing them. They're fun to talk about and fun to speculate about. But it's always nice when my expectations are surpassed, especially with stuff like this. When I saw it, when it was first announced, they didn't give like a ton of detail of it, and it seemed like it was gonna be very samey to these multiple villain scenarios we've had in the past, and then it's not. It is different. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. It's pretty interesting. And then lastly with Magneto, like I said, this is one of the first times I feel like they gave us a stage 5 villain or scenario 5 villain that's doable, right? Like with Ronin, with Venom Goblin, with Loki, it just always felt like this crazy uphill battle that I would never be able to achieve. Now I have, right? I've beaten all of them except for Venom Goblin on solo. But Magneto, at least out of the gate, feels like, no, like I can do this. This is doable. It's going to be really, really hard. I'm going to have to play a good game, but it's doable. And I really appreciate that. And I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway from this box is that they have obviously learned a lot from all the boxes that they've done previously. I mean, Rise of Red Skull, I still think is one of the best boxes out there. Guardians, I think, was one of the biggest missteps. And since then, they've kept getting better, right? Now, again, the Scenario 5 villain, I think difficulty has always been a little too high, but that's okay. I think Mad Titan Shadow was a good box. I enjoy Thanos, even though he's pretty hard. I really enjoy Hela. I enjoy the 2 villain one, which escapes my mind off right now, right? And Ebony Maw. Like I like all those scenarios. And for the Spider-Man box, right, Sinister Motives, I like that box too. I think it's pretty interesting what they did. They tried new and different things, and it feels like the villains in that box are super fresh and interesting. I think the villains in that box are a little more different than the ones in the X-Men box, as in like how unique they are. I think that Sinister Motives box still has the most unique villains, but I will say that the X-Men box feels like the most balanced one I played. It feels like they finally are kind of getting things right in a row, right? Like there wasn't any huge missteps in this box that I can see so far, unless they change the rulings with something with Magneto, which there's a chance, depending on how they rule on something, that they can mess up Magneto, in my opinion, and make him way over the top hard and make him harder than anything else. And if you want a video on that, let me know down in the comments. But we'll see if that even comes to fruition. But if it doesn't, then I feel like what they've truly learned from all these boxes previously is being put into practice. And again, there wasn't like a huge misstep in this box, which is really cool. It's really, really great to see. I will say that overall, as a higher difficulty level, I think this was easier than some of the previous boxes. And this kind of goes to my running theory of that they are using this box and this cycle, and most likely the next cycle and the following cycle, depending on how many they do it for X-Men, as a way to introduce people into the game. So they had to walk a really fine line, right? They had to introduce people into the game that were not interested before, but really wanted X-Men. So they got into it. They got the X-Men box, and they're kind of easing their way into this, and balance us veteran players who've been playing all the boxes, been playing a lot, know how to kind of really deck build well, and still make it challenging for us. And that's why when I say how Project Wide Awake and Master Mold are on the easier side, I'm not even upset about it, right? I understand it because they are trying to walk that line. And honestly, I think they might have made it a little too difficult for new players, but I don't think they're complaining too much because it is still fun. It's still interesting. It's still different. So I will say, I had some, I was a little skeptical with this box. I was wrong. I was flat out wrong. This box is really good. It's really fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It gives me a lot of, I don't know if hope is the right word, but it makes me excited for future boxes, right? I think that if they keep this balance moving forward and maybe up the difficulty on everything just a little, just a touch, I think it will continue moving in the right direction. And I'm really excited for that. And I'm happy that the X-Men stuff started off on a strong foot. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you could do me a huge favor, scroll down a bit, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on the notifications so you know when my videos go live, and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts about the X-Men box. I am always interested in hearing that stuff. And also, if you want to support this channel monetarily, hit the join button. There's a bunch of different tiers and different ways to support this channel, starting off at 99 cents. So if you're interested in doing that, feel free to. But yeah, long story short, I enjoy it better than I expected. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the next box they come out with is.